Valentine and welcome to the links. It's Valentine's Day and that means it's time to share some love. In my case, it means to upload a new video for you guys. Even though I'm a little late. So let's start right with the doll to make it up. As a base, I used this half-complete Avia Trotter doll. These arms from an electric Frankie doll, and this head that I found in my box. It's already shrunken and stone solid, but that actually comes in handy since I have had 2 less acetone to shrink the head either way. So instead of waiting a few days, I could start with the doll right away. Like always, I prepared the head for some inserted eyes by cutting out the eye holes. Or at least I tried this time. Because it was drying for I really can't remember how long, it was so solid that I could not cut through the plastic. I decided to take out my Dremel instead and drill some holes in her eyes to have a starting point at least. Beautiful, right? And not creepy at all! After that, it was way easier to cut piece by piece. Actually, I prefer to cut this hard plastic over the wobbly original one. I feel like my cuts are way more precise this way. The Frankie sculpt has pretty cute features, like big pouty lips and round cheeks, and so I wanted to give her big round eyes to fit that aesthetic. When I was satisfied, I started to work a little more on the body. First thing was obviously the rest of the tail that had to go. I was a little unsure how to remove it, but with a little force it came out. Now we still had the problem that all pieces had different colors, and I wanted to solve that with a little bit of red dye more in pink, because it's Valentine's! I already expected the parts to take the dye differently, especially since they all had a different base color, but the result was actually not that bad. Dyeing is mostly important for the joints after all, because painted on color scratches off there too easily. But before adding some paint, I opened up her head to be able to insert some eyes later. Normally I do that with an X-Acto knife, but like I said, the plastic was so solid that I needed my Dremel instead. After that it was time for some modifications. I wanted to give her some pointy ears and antlers made out of epoxy sculpt. For the clay to have a base, I first inserted some wire before I started sculpting. I have to say that I really improved on this. These antlers were the best I ever made. There was no need to sand away like half of the material afterwards. They turned out slim and beautiful from the start. It made me really happy. Nevertheless, sanding is always necessary once dry, to get rid of the last imperfections. Something I also learned is the difference in epoxy sculpt. I always worked with the grey one called Natural, but for a few weeks now I'm using the white one. It's a little more dry and I nearly always need to add water while sculpting, but I can handle it way better. Do you have any experiences with the different colors of epoxy sculpt and their behavior? Let me know in the comments. To match all the sculpting and different dyeing results, I sprayed the whole doll with a plastic primer and used my acrylic paints and my airbrush. I always tend to mix my paints with too much water, so they get really thin and need several layers to build up. Someday I will figure that out eventually. For her upper body I used a light pink, and for the horse part I took a dark brownish red. I wanted to loosely mimic the look of a cherry tree a little, with the light pink blossoms and the dark brown tree branch. As the last step, I added some whites to the hooves, chest and horse body. Even though the white color on the horse was not so much my taste, so I changed that back afterwards. But due to white shining through, it made a nice gradient, so it was no waste at all. Her antlers needed some color too, and I decided for some straight white acrylic paint to do the job. I secured all the paints with a few layers of Liquitex matte varnish before adding 2 layers of Mr. Super Clear sealant. The MSC gives the plastic a rough surface, so the pastels hold on. As always, I started with some blushing here and there with some strong pink and some violets to darken the shadows on the upper body. For the horse part, I used straight black because all the other colors were too light. At last, I also used some white pastels for highlights. Since the sealant always takes white pastels away, I brush it on very heavily, so it builds a subtle shimmer with multiple layers. But before adding said sealant, I painted her head with white acrylic paint where the hair would be later on. To my surprise, the white pastel dust was still visible even after spraying the doll. That never happened before. But instead of darkening the shadows even more, I jumped right in with my acrylic paints to paint the eyeliner and some lashes. Just like the hair, in white of course. But stupid me was not thinking smart and painted with acrylic straight instead of gouache like usual. I don't know why, since I normally always paint faces with gouache, because of the possibility to wash away any mistakes. So that's why the lashes on her left eye look not so good. But I did not learn from that and continued with acrylics, painted her eyebrows and lips. It still turned out quite good, I think, but would have been even better with my gouache paints. Nevertheless, I really love her face up. It looks really cute and pretty clean in my opinion. I'm a bit proud. For her eyes, I used these resin bases that I once prepared and painted them with acrylic paints. First layer was the dark red that I also used on her horse body, followed by the pink of her upper body. As a finishing touch, I also added some whites around her pupil. My idea was to make her somehow blind eyes with a white pupil and some reds or pinks in the iris. Since one always say love is blind, I thought it would be pretty fitting, even though they did not turn out exactly how I imagined. But that's the fun part about fantasy customs in my opinion. They kinda take their own way and I'm always making up my ideas on the go, so it's a little surprise to me as well how the end result will look. For some more sparkle, I added some micro glitter and a big glitter particle as the pupil before adding some clear UV resin on top. But before I could insert her eyes in the head, she needed some lashes. For that, I used normal human false lashes and trimmed them a bit. With a toothpick and some PVA glue, I glued them in the eye holes and waited for them to dry. This time, I also added some white paint to them to match her face up. Sadly, I can't find any white lashes for a reasonable price, so I always have to make it work like that. Better than nothing! Placing her eyes inside the head showed that her iris was a little too big and took over her whole eye. Not what I had planned, but I really liked it, since you barely see the sclera on an animal eye, so it was a good fit. As a last touch, I glued her head cap with the antlers back on and waited for everything to dry. I really am a big fan of dreadlocks and wanted to try some this time. A few of my drawing characters have this hairstyle, so I thought it was about time to add that to one of my dolls. But just gluing yarn strands on the doll seemed a little too easy for me, looking like I just did not know a better solution. Which is kinda true, but anyway. I decided to try out something different. First, I pulled out the single strands of a yarn strand and folded them twice. After that, I dunked them into a mixture of water and glue, twisted them and let them dry. Like this, I hoped that it looked more like actual hair fiber turned into a dreadlock. It was quite time consuming and I discovered a faster method later on, but the most frustrating point was more that the difference to a normal yarn strand was not really noticeable. I changed to just letting normal strands soak into the glue, so they would stay twisted and a bit more stiff. That already helped. Do you have a good technique for making dreadlocks? Let me know in the comments. I also prepared some normal wefts that I glued to her chest as fur. Does that look familiar? Maybe for all of you who saw my video about Venora. They actually are the same species, so stick to the end to learn more about her, her story and her connection to Venora. After the wefts were dry, I gave them a good trim and brushed them a little bit with water and a toothbrush to stay in place. For her tail, I used the same method as for her hair, just with more strands to have bigger dreadlocks. A little glue, a little force, and it was attached to her body. Finally, going on to her hair. I was a little afraid that the locks I prepared were too less, so I ended up cutting a little more yarn and used that as it was for the first layer. To attach the hair, I chose my hot glue gun this time, since the locks were pretty stiff and not flowing like normal hair either way. So it was a good solution for a faster result. Especially since these locks were pretty big, so covering the whole head was not an option. Instead, I glued the upper half nearly completely to the sculpt, ending in a ponytail at the back of her head. It actually worked out even better than I expected. Some of you may have noticed small little flower bouquets in my videos or pictures on Instagram. They are made by my friend KAMI&ARTS out of paper. For this project now, I commissioned her to make me the smallest little flower she could make, and here you can see the result. Aren't they adorable? Please check out her Insta and Etsy, her work is so lovely. I ordered the flowers in the wrong shade of pink though, because at that time I had another color concept in mind. Lucky me, they are made out of paper, like I already said, so I took my gouache colors to give them a slightly new shade of pink. And while I was at it, I also added some magenta shading in the middle. Now they really were a perfect fit for my doll and could be added to her antlers. And with that, our Valentine special doll is done. I really love how she turned out, even though I'm not the biggest fan of pinks. Fitting to the colors and the holidays, I called her Adora. And of course she has a story too. Adora is one of the spirits of Mogra. Since the wall appeared and separated the human kingdom Eben from the magic lands, some events led to the birth of these spirits, called Teiboras. There exist only a few of them, and everyone is unique in their own way. Just like Venora, Adora was born out of love. The love between two beings from opposite sides of the magic wall. Their feelings for each other were so strong that they overcame the hate between the kingdoms and were even able to cross the border to be with each other. Some say that this couple even got married in Mogra and was blessed by the gods from this day on. That was Adora's little story. If you're even more interested in her species and the universe she lives in, this year will be great for you. I will build a website where the whole world is explained and share it with you guys by the end of the year. Work in progress pictures and updates will all be shared on my Patreon, where you can pay what you want to see all the content. Moreover, all the specials this year will be one of these spirits with their own unique story and look. So you get to know my doll universe a little better. I hope you will enjoy this journey together with me. Until then, have a wonderful day, my little lynxes. Thank you so much for all your support. Hit the bell button to never miss a video and stay healthy. See you soon. Tschüss!